Welcome back to another edition of Forecast Lab. Yeah, look at that terminator line up there near the top, the demarcation between daytime and nighttime. It is coming pretty far south because we are getting close to the winter solstice. The winter night taking hold up there in the Northwest Territories, Hudson Bay, and Nunavut, and of course, Alaska. Vast area of cold air advection in the Atlantic Ocean as a large polar high settles across the eastern U.S., and of course this weather system moving through the Gulf Coast region. Let's take a look at the surface map. So how do we break down this surface map for this afternoon? A lot of you may be looking at the fronts, warm front, cold front, and so on. But I like to start out with the air masses, and those are best represented with the high pressure areas. Big old 1036 millibar high up there in Quebec. There it is. Temperatures within that in the 20s, and even a few teens up there in Labrador. Some of that cold air spreading into the eastern states, a little bit of cold air damming in the Carolinas. And of course, out in the western U.S., we have a different air mass, a plateau high with temperatures in the 40s and 50s. This is maintained by the strong radiational cooling at nighttime, and some areas do have snow cover, which helps enhance the cooling as well. And then we look in between. We've got our Gulf Coast system right there, stretching from Missouri down to Louisiana. Showers and a few storms out ahead of that. We've got the Comet Cloud in Iowa, clearing with downslope flow through Oklahoma and Texas, and then of course another weather system moving into the northwestern U.S. Let's take a look at the regional conditions, starting with the northeast states. And here we do see a mix of different conditions. Very prominent cold air advection off of the east coast, those streamers, cloud streets, cumulus and stratocumulus spreading southward. And on the other side, we've got warm advection starting to set up, starting out with the initial band of cirrus moving in. And that gets into progressively thicker layers, the altostratus and altocumulus. And then we start picking up the low cloud layers in Illinois, western Kentucky. That consists of stratocumulus and maybe some cumuliform elements like cumulonimbus embedded, towering cumulus, and so on, and of course the deep convection further to the west. So that's kind of how things are set up, and we can look at the water vapor imagery. We see the subsidence, the dry air associated with that cold air advection, and on the other side we've got the warm air advection with upward motion indicated by much more humid air showing up very well on that water vapor imagery. Cold air advection all through the Canadian Maritimes. You can see these gusts up near 45 knots into Nova Scotia. And we go into Maine, catching some of that cold air advection, and winds are out of the north, even all the way into Pennsylvania. It will be a cold one for tonight. We're looking at teens in Maine, 20s in Boston, down to the New York City suburbs, even 20s outside Philadelphia. Freeze warning in effect tonight for southern Nassau County on Long Island. Temperatures falling to about 30. And then, of course, we're going to have the next weather system approaching for tomorrow. Further south, wind warnings around Elkins due to strong southeast winds gusting to 35 miles an hour and low relative humidity. So look at that dew point there, -1 at Elkins. So certainly some very dry air making its way down to the surface. And dew points are in the 20s and 30s all the way into the Carolinas. And of course, cold air has infiltrated there as well. We call that cold air damming because the Appalachians and Blue Ridge Mountains, they're located right there, and then when the winds have to turn into that low pressure area approaching from the west, they can't make it over the mountains. So it sits there and forms this little pool of cold air that remains in place for quite a long time. And we end up with kind of a quasi-stationary front right through this area here as these systems approach from the west. So that can be a very potent area of freezing precipitation during cold weather situations. High wind warning for tonight in the Great Smoky Mountains, wind advisory in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Winds could gust up to 50 to 65 miles an hour through there. And further south, rain breaking out in Mississippi, Alabama, down towards New Orleans and Gulfport. And we do have high surf and rip currents in the Pensacola area tonight and tomorrow morning. There's a quick look at that water vapor imagery. You can see that dry air moving in from the west. Let's take a closer look at that. Vast area of subsidence spreading across Texas, Oklahoma. Why don't we take a look at a sounding out there? Say around Fort Smith down to Dallas. I think the high-resolution rapid refresh will work for those purposes. Fort Smith sounding looking like this. And you can see most of that dry air is concentrated in the mid and upper levels. The water vapor imagery is sensitive mostly to these levels right there. And certainly quite dry. And you go even higher up in the atmosphere, about 30,000, 25,000 feet, and you get a very huge temperature dew point spread. Those dew points down to minus 65, minus 70. Then in Dallas, the soundings at this time look like this. Dry air above 8,000 feet, so maybe a very clear night coming up for tonight. And the visible imagery does show dry conditions. Out there in Colorado and New Mexico, there's the snow cover from the winter weather system last week. And in Kansas and Missouri, upper level low. That's pretty much what you saw there on the 500 millibar heights and vorticity. Very unstable conditions, producing multiple layers of stratocumulus and altocumulus. All right, a little bit of forcing right there in eastern Oklahoma as that frontal system exits to the east. Otherwise, we're looking at improving conditions across the Great Plains. There's that cold air flowing southward, 60s across Oklahoma into the panhandles, and we start picking up 50s into Kansas. Parts of central Kansas do have a wind advisory. Ellsworth, Russell, Great Bend, northwest winds gusting to 45 miles an hour as that cold advection sweeps southeast. And up there in the Dakotas, temperatures are in the 40s and 50s. Rather mild for this time of year, even 50s, mid-50s at Glasgow and Jordan. In the southwestern U.S., a vast warm-up in the deserts. Up to 80 degrees at Phoenix for this afternoon. It does remain cold in the Four Corners area, looking at 50s there for highs. The San Joaquin Valley this afternoon also hanging on to 60s, but they do have the winter storm watches and winter weather advisories posted in the Sierras, especially for tomorrow night into Friday. A major winter storm heading inland. And here it is, the first of a 1-2 punch. This is the main Bear Clinic system moving into Northern California. Cold front with cold advection on the backside. You can see that telltale speckled appearance, open cell cumulus, and some deeper convective elements up to the north. The rest of the picture, let's show you the upper level chart. Here's what it looks like right now, rather channeled flow across California into Idaho. But overnight, and then into later tomorrow evening, a strong trough moving in. The Los Angeles area under the divergent left front quadrant, and further north, Northern California is going to be right there within that trough. You can see temperatures at 500 millibars ranging from minus 26 to minus 30. That is very cold air, which means very unstable conditions in the low levels. It's a good environment for snow showers. Elsewhere around California, dry in the southern part of the state and looking pretty good in Nevada as well. In the northwestern U.S., cloudy and dreary. Highs today running from 55 at Seattle to 57 at Portland. 50s in the interior deserts and 40s in the high country. Wind advisory for this afternoon in western Montana, around Livingston, southwest winds gusting to 60 miles an hour, and we have a high wind warning around the Pendleton area of Oregon, looking for south winds gusting to 60 miles an hour. Winter storm warning continues through tomorrow. In the northern Cascades, the Okanogan Forest, up to 12 inches of snow expected with winds to 40 miles an hour. And this is a new thing that we're going to start doing. We're going to show the West Coast. I know we have some viewers out in that area, so this will give you a little bit of perspective. You can see the main bear clinic zone right there off the California coast. And as we go into tomorrow, that upper level trough moves onshore, and we see an increase in precipitation later on Thursday. Friday also a little bit unsettled, but some clearing expected going into Saturday. And here's another system. There's the warm front, cold front, and so on. And this will make its way onto the West Coast later in the weekend, and a large area of cold air advection following in the wake. And yet another storm as that very active weather pattern continues, acting very much like an El Nino year. And we go into the end of next week and continued unsettled across much of the western U.S. Here's a look at the East Coast. I don't know if we have any viewers out there, but there's that big 1038 millibar high in Labrador. Will be pretty stormy in the Maritimes for the remainder of the week. A pause over the weekend, and then we get a very deep system developing along the tail end of this front. There it is coming together. Sort of a low-grade nor'easter. Most of the precipitation is rain. Then we get some very strong cold advection for late next week all across the Great Lakes area, eastern U.S., very little of that coming south into Texas. Here's a quick look at other areas around North America. Rainy in Vancouver, the northern Vancouver metro area, under a rainfall warning, 2 to 3 inches of rain expected. Could cause local street flooding that extends north along Howe Sound, up Highway 99 to Eagle Run. Winter storm warning around Fort St. John, looking for about 4 to 6 inches of snow today. And also on Haida Gwaii, that little island right there, they are looking for 1.5 to 2.5 inches of rain. Rather quiet in Alaska. We do have gale warnings in effect for coastal areas, the southern Alaska Peninsula coast, also eastern Bering Sea under gale warnings. Then taking a look west into Canada, we're starting to see some of that brutal cold, minus 17 on Banks Island, minus 16 on northern Victoria Island. So this is the coldest temperatures I've seen in that part of North America for this time of year. And of course, it will be getting much colder as we go into December. A winter storm in Hudson Bay. We do have blizzard warnings up at Salouet in the northern part of Quebec, and then further south, high winds affecting that area as well. Could see 50 miles an hour inland and 65 miles an hour anywhere between St. John's and Stephenville. Some developments taking place in the Caribbean Sea south of Jamaica. Potential tropical cyclone 19, winds 30 miles an hour, and there's the potential for that to develop into a hurricane. You can see the maximum winds 70 miles an hour. So for the time being, they're keeping that at tropical storm strength. And the path is pretty much directly west into Belize. Here's the very latest GFS forecast. This pretty much goes as the National Hurricane Center expects, quasi-stationary. However, the previous model runs were very bullish, pulling that north and developing that into a strong hurricane. This is pretty far down the road, and none of the other global models have been quite that aggressive, so very likely we're going to be falling in line with something like that. Again, no concern for any strong development at this time, but of course we want to keep an eye on that over the next few days. Here's a look at the model run for last night. This is definitely more aggressive, keeping that well offshore and carrying that into the central Gulf as a strong hurricane. However, as I mentioned, the latest model run's not really doing anything like that. Anyway, as the storm forms, it will become Tropical Storm Sara, and depending on how things go, this could also be Hurricane Sara. So let's take a look at that forecast. This is the GFS output with analysis by myself. So you're not going to really see anything like this on the internet. Very detailed analysis of the model data. So going into tonight and into tomorrow, very rainy in the Ohio River Valley, the Great Lakes region, as the system moves to the east and comes into the Appalachians. Will be a rainy day from the Carolinas up to the eastern Great Lakes. Continued cold in the northeastern U.S. as that cold bubble continues sitting over that region. Highs in the 40s everywhere with 50s further south into Virginia. In the central U.S., a modest cool down with this new high-pressure area dropping south. Highs in the 60s with low 70s around DFW and Shreveport. In the western U.S., a little bit warmer in the southwestern deserts. Looking for 84 at Phoenix. Temperatures remaining just about the same everywhere else. Continued rainy in the Pacific Northwest, and rains begin spreading into northern California. And there it is during the overnight hours. Snow picking up in the Sierras into Friday morning. Meanwhile, out to the east, here is this Pacific weather system moving into the Four Corners area, into Wyoming, and into Nebraska. Things warming up in the eastern U.S. 50s return to New York and the Northeast Corridor, 60s in southern Virginia. Mild in the central U.S., looking at 60s and 70s, and a dramatic warm-up in the Rio Grande Valley, looking at 80s, all up into the Permian Basin. Extensive snows throughout the Great Basin region. Rains continue in the San Joaquin Valley, and much colder just about everywhere in the western U.S., highs of only 73 at Phoenix. Then we go into Saturday. Things warm up in Texas. We start to get that onshore flow, warm advection, and maybe the start of a low-level jet. Looking at 87 in Presidio in the Big Bend region. Rains all the way up into Grand Forks. I know we have a few viewers out there. And bitterly cold across the western states. Saturday night into Sunday could be rather cold. Looking at 27 at Salt Lake City, 42 at Las Vegas, and single digits in northern Nevada. Then we go into Sunday. Frontal system from Illinois all the way down towards New Mexico. Chance of showers all through this region right here as that warm advection continues and intersects the frontal boundaries. There could be storms in Texas and Oklahoma for Sunday night. Yeah, there they are starting to get set up along this warm front, and you can see things are getting quite stormy out there in New Mexico. This frontal system pulls to the northeast into the Corn Belt region. Some rather significant deepening. This is a track very similar to the Edmund Fitzgerald storm lifting out of Kansas. Very similar, but probably not quite as deep. I don't know. The Edmund Fitzgerald storm that was down to about 981, 982 millibars. I think this could be a dead ringer for that storm. So, yeah, this will bear watching. November 19th, probably not a good time to take your grain ship out onto the lakes, or I think that was an ore carrier. All right, the rest of the week. Yeah, vast cold advection sweeping all through the Dakotas into the Ohio River Valley, and not as much cold air going south into Oklahoma and Texas. And that is the very last frame. Looks rather quiet late next week, and don't quite have Thanksgiving in the picture just yet. But early next week, we probably will have a better idea what's going to be happening for the holidays. And that is all for this edition of Forecast Lab. Just as a reminder, we do need your support to help keep this program going. This is a one-man show. It takes many hours of prep work for each episode. If you want to see us expand into 3 to 4 days a week, we do need the backing of all viewers who join us regularly. 1 month of support on Patreon. It's about the same as a cup of coffee at Starbucks, and I would hope the information here is a better deal with less calories. Hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday and a pleasant Thursday, and we'll see you back here on Friday for another installment. Take care. Bye-bye.